Okay, thanks y'all for coming. I started getting really involved with property taxes in 2003 and started protesting property taxes in 2003 from my clients. And between 2000 and 2005 in Harris County, if you owned a home, your property taxes went up 63% in market value. If you owned a home the last 5 years, your market value is up over 40%. It's a big deal. And so what I want to talk a little bit about is how the process works, where they get their numbers, how we can protest, and a couple of little things that you don't know that happen to us that are very, very important. Case in point, you know when you get the little card in the mail from Harris County saying that this is your homestead, is it still a homestead, right? You know what that card's for? That's third-class mail. It does not get forwarded. If that gets returned to Harris County, you lose your homestead exemption. If you don't get that card, you need to check your tax record because it may have gotten lost in the mail and gets back to Harris County. My parents, as most of you know, are living in an assisted living home now. We still have their home, 65 exemption, and I've got their mail forwarded to me. The card went back to Harris County, and we were talking about taxes the middle of the year last year, and it was just like my head exploded. Holy crap, I teach this stuff. I get on my computer, and my parents' exemption said pending, which means it's going away. And I'm also a water board director in Terre-Neuve West and have been for 15 years, so I'm involved on the tax assessment side as well. So I've got a friend at the tax office. I've got a friend at the tax collection office, and I called Cindy and she gave me some phone calls to make. I made some phone calls. I had to prove where they're living. I had to prove that they were still alive. I had to prove that the house was still there, and they let me keep my parents' exemption. But that had been a big deal. Okay, so the little blue cards are very, very important. We are in tax value time. The computers are working right now. All of your values are currently pending. If you go on HCAD and look, we don't know what the new values are this year. Just had a closing last week on new construction. The last tax record, 2019, was land valued. We're waiting for the assessed value. The counties are keeping up with it now. But in the old days, a lot of times you can keep the lot value for the next year because the law says value as of January 1st. Well, that house was mostly finished on January 1st, so they're going to get their money. So how does the county do it? The county, so we have Harris County Appraisal District, that's one entity. Then we have the tax assessor collector, which is a different entity. Harris County Appraisal District, all they do is set value. It is a computer. Nobody's going to come to your house. When it's first built, sometimes they do come out and measure the outside. You do not ever have to let them inside your house. It's not required. But the computer generates value for a neighborhood. Where does that value come from? It starts at the state controller's office. The state controller tells the tax assessor collectors in the counties how much value they want on the records for that year. And then it's the tax assessor, the tax chief appraiser that sends his appraisers out to get value. One of the hard things in Harris County is, since we're a non-disclosure state, and I'll get to that, the real estate, the residential side of that in a second, commercial value is very, very difficult for the county to come up with. You got a $10 million office building and the county raises your taxes 30%, you're going to court. And the county doesn't want to do that. They have attorneys on staff. And so the commercial guys have it easier than the residential guys. And the residential side ends up paying more taxes because the commercial is not getting assessed at what they should be. So a couple of years ago, I'm at a water board meeting, and I asked my tax collector, I said, how come we're seeing Harris County know what the value of sold properties are almost instantaneously. And she laughed. She said they hired a bunch of out-of-work realtors. Harris County has a bunch of realtors, and actually one of the people in this office goes down there and works. But anyway, some of y'all know who she is. But they pay them by the hour to pull sold values. And I would think that's a HAR violation, but no one's doing anything about that. So step into the circle of influence side. Why do we need to know all this stuff? Well, first of all, it gives you a chance to talk to people in your database. I'll do at least 2 mailings a year, first part of the year, saying it's tax protest time, it's time to go. And I actually go through my database on a regular, at least once a year, checking their exemptions, seeing if I can find somebody that either lost their exemption or something happened. The closing I had last week, they're both 65, and so we're going to wait to see what their value is by the county. If their value comes out of as a vacant lot, we're not going to do anything till toward the end of the year. But if it comes out as a house, we're going to file their 65 instantly. The 65 exemption, you do not have to wait till January 1st. It's a birthday present. The minute you close, you can file your 65 exemption. Homestead, you have to own the property as of January 1st of the year that you are filing for your homestead. There is really only one homestead. The homestead gets added to the 65 or gets added to the disability. And there's a state law saying that you can't do anything on HCAD to let anybody know that it's a 65 exemption. That's why it just says the word multiple, because it could be a disabled, it could be a 65. So we get our exemption. And probably the number one question I get asked is, how do you figure what the exemption is? Okay, Harris County and Montgomery County are very, very similar. It's approximately $160,000 exemption. The first 160 is not taxed. On a 65, on a homestead, it's not quite that much. All the school districts have a different amount of exemption. Most of the water districts do not have a homestead, but they have a 65. But like in my district, the 65 is only 10,000. So it's the math is really hard on a homestead. What I do is if it's a house under $300,000, I'll just throw out 10, 11%, and you'll be pretty close, and you'll be wrong in your client's favor. But when we start getting the bigger numbers, it gets harder, because then we're really talking real tax dollars. And if you're in the $500,000 range and the value goes up 100,000, you're past any kind of exemption status. I don't go down to HCAT anymore to protest in person. I have a lot of clients that love doing it. I've got several business owners that love doing it. Sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not. I use either Betancourt or O'Connor. Stacy's husband does it. I refer it out, but it still gives me a chance to talk to my clients. Still gives me a chance to talk to my database. And I get to check on it. Did you protest your taxes? So let's go to the county side of protesting. You have to protest it, was it April 15th? Is that right? It's either April 15th or May 15th. It used to be the end of the month, but they moved it up 2 weeks because so many people are protesting. April 15th. You have to have your exemption, you have to have your protest filed by April 15th, or within 30 days of getting the card that says what your value is. So if you don't get your card in the mail till April 30th, you still have 30 days to file your protest. However, they don't have to mail you a card. If your value didn't go up more than, I think it's $2,000, they're not going to mail you a card anyway. So you file your protest. Okay, what happens next? You're going to get contacted by the county that says, do you want to I-settle? I-settle is settling your protest online through the appraisal district. It's the same computer. They just wash you back through the computer. They may give you a couple $100, whatever. I don't recommend you do that. My protests with Betancourt, they go down and they do 100 properties at once. And They're used to the appraisals, they're used to the board, and they're generally successful. My parents' house, they live in Spring Shadows. It's not a ridiculously expensive house, but Bettencourt got their value down $100,000 last year, which was fabulous. And Spring Shadows did not go down in value last year. But the point is, you have to protest every year, because if you win $1,000 in value this year, that's for as long as you own the home, because the computer is judging value based on the entire neighborhood. All right, so if I win $500 this year, that's $500 forever, because next year when they reassess my property and everybody goes up 5%, I'm going up 5% on a $500 lower number. So it's very, very critical that you protest every single year. If you're not protesting your property taxes, you're paying too much property tax. It's just that simple. There are two ways to protest your property taxes. One is market value. The house next door is the exact same as mine, and they sold it for less than you're charging me property taxes. The other way is unequal assessed value. The house next door is just like mine, but you have the value assessed less than mine. And that's where you're going to win. Okay, those of you that have been in real estate for a long time, have you noticed that the tax record on HCAD has gotten longer and longer and longer? And they're talking about flat work, they're talking about porches, they're talking about covered areas, they're talking, you know why they're doing that? So you can't use it against yours. They're going to say, oh, no, they got a porch, you don't. And so they're making it more difficult. Back when we started this protest stuff, when you start your protest and you get your first I-settle information, you're going to have an I-file number, the top of the letter. Your I-file number is your protest number. Years ago, you could go in before your hearing, put in your I-file number, and get the houses they're using against you, the discovery, so to speak. And it used to be 7 houses. Anybody didn't do it last year? How many houses?
Oh, no, I remember doing it, what you're saying.
30. I've seen 100. They're all over the place. You might be in Terra Nova West, and they're bringing houses from Lakewood Forest.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And you're going in there saying, no, this is not right. One of my favorite protests out of the office, it was so cool. Wendy Roloff, she lives in Champions Forest. And she went in person to protest her taxes, and she went in with a 3-by-4 foot map of Champions Forest with, you know how Champions Forest is kind of concentric rings of value? Mm-hmm. You know, row 1 is the $1 million houses, row 2 is the $900,000. She got her value dropped by hundreds of thousands of dollars because she showed to them where she was in the neighborhood on the map and showed the value of the houses around her house. They were using the ones a couple of rows up front, and that's not right. Another really cool one was, you know where Bainbridge is? The gated subdivision, Ella and Luetta. When they first put that in, there were 3 custom builders that went in there. 2 of the custom builders were custom track, and one of them was a true custom, really beautiful work on the inside of the house. Well, so they built a subdivision, and then they pushed all the trees and put in the strip center. So our client went to protest his taxes, and there were 3 comps in the neighborhood that sold that backed up to the strip center that were all the lesser of the custom builders. We got his property taxes dropped by $200,000. So sometimes it can work in our favor. So your next step is going before the review board and stating your case. I think there's 3 appraisers, and they're supposed to work. They work for the appraisal district. They're supposed to be fair. And I've heard some good stories last year where they were very, very nice to the homeowners, and they gave them a good drop in value. And then I also heard where it was just a complete waste of time. I don't want to go through that with high blood pressure and all that, so I have Bettencourt do mine. I probably win at least every other year, something, and I'm okay with that. So then if you're not happy with that result, you can file suit, you can go further. I've never gone further. But I wanted to talk a little bit about value. What I handed out, anybody got? This is a cut and paste job. Okay, the top where I've got the 5-year history, this is on a 65 exemption house. I cut when you go on HCAD and pull up the tax record for the house, there's a little line that says 5-year history. You can click on that. I clicked on that, printed it, and I pasted that over the name of the homeowner. So look at the first circle is the value in 2016, 178,862. 2019, 238,064. Drop down, and you see that this is kind of really, really important. Under valuations, you see appraised and market. Okay, the appraised number is what the taxes will be charged on. That is with the current 10% property tax cap or a 65 exemption. The market value is what they want to charge you taxes on, what they think the house is worth. My little quick math up at the top, if you take 342, subtract 178, take the difference, divide it by 178, this lady's taxes, her tax market value went up 92% in 4 years. How is that right? But that's the way we work in Harris County. I saw one a couple of weeks ago that was over 100% increase in 4 years. All right. We have some new legislation, and I called Betancourt's office last week, and I called my tax people, and I don't have complete clarification, but we have some new rules. Not the previous legislative session, but 2 sessions ago, they passed a law that if the revenue for a taxing entity increased more than 10% of inflation, if you add growth and inflation together, and if that was more than 10%, the county had to hold a hearing to see if they're going to keep the money. And Harris County held the hearing 2 years ago. Their value was up past that. And actually, Paul Betancourt spoke at the hearing, and the county says, we're not raising taxes, but we're keeping the extra revenue. This last session, they set that number at 3.5%. Okay, so what I interpret that to mean that if a taxing entity, a water district, a school district, a county, if their revenue, the actual tax dollars is more that they receive is more than 3.5%, and that number is greater, they have to have an election to collect that money. They actually have to hold an election of everybody in the taxing, like a KISD, they'll have to hold an election to keep that extra money. The other option is you drop your tax rate. So in my water district, since they passed the growth and inflation cap on revenue, we dropped our tax rate every year because our value has increased. We can always use the money, but we didn't have to have it, so we dropped our tax rate. And I think a lot of the water districts in the area dropped their tax rates. School districts dropped this year, but that was legislative. Let's see. Okay, water districts. Water districts were formed to develop property outside of cities. When the Champions area was being built, it was outside of the city limits of Houston. So the city limits says, we're not going to give you water and sewer. So you have to come up with your own. So we have what's called the TCEQ, that's the Texas Center for Environmental Quality. They are in charge of all water in the state of Texas. And if a developer wants to develop a subdivision, they have to go to the TCEQ, give them their information, and the TCEQ will either establish a water district or have them be annexed or send them to try to go with another subdivision. Take Terra Nova West. We're a different water district than Terra Nova, but we annexed Terra Vista, the Oaks of Terra Nova West, and Villanova. And so now it's all one water district. It's actually 3 neighborhoods. We all have the same HOA, but we were able to provide water and sewer. Okay, well, the TCEQ allows the water district they authorize them to issue bonds. Go into the water district form. You have an authorized number and an issued number. So in our district, we were authorized for X number of millions of dollars. We have issued this many bonds, and we're paying the taxes on what's been issued. Okay. We have MUDs, we have PUDs, public utility districts. I know a couple of y'all in here know what a PID is, a public improvement district. They don't have MUD taxes. The one I'm the most familiar with is City of Tomball. There's a subdivision up there. Houses are 300,000, 400,000, over $1 million. Tomball says, we'll give you water and sewer, but we're not paying for the infrastructure. And the developer said, well, I really don't want to develop a water district and go through all that, so we'll make it a public improvement district. So all the homes in the PID pay, I think it's $2,000 to $3,000 a year.
$4,500 in reserve its premiums.
Okay, $4,500 a year for 20 years. It's just a bill you get once a year, but you don't have a water tax.
So it's not deductible?
I don't know the income tax side of it. I deduct everything,
It's not.
but that's on recorded. Two types of bonds. A water district issues a tax bond and charges taxes on that bond to repay the bond. The Regional Water Authority issues revenue bonds. They cannot, by law, be paid for with tax dollars. That's why you have an RWA fee on your water bill. You're having to pay for surface water bond indebtedness. And so far, the Regional Water Authority has borrowed, it's well north of $1 billion to stick a straw in the Trinity River. That's a whole nother discussion. So talking about back to exemptions, one of the things that a good thing to do if you're doing any geographic farming is to go through your geographic farm and look at your record by record. And since I took these people's name off this sheet, you can't look at it, but you have 2 addresses at the top of the record, the tax record. One is the property address and one is where the tax bill goes. And so if you go through the tax records and you pull, look at the tax records and you see where the addresses are the same, you can kind of assume they live there. Then you can go back into HAR and say, well, when did they buy the house? Well, if they bought the house a couple of years ago, that's an opportunity to contact them. And I know Mimi's done it. Contact them and tell them that they may have a homestead exemption that they're not getting. And if they would like, you'll help them do it. It doesn't cost anything. It's just another way to touch people. This time of the year, I don't mail out homestead forms for my buyers from the previous year. I go visit them in person. That's just me. I think it's a little more fun. And we have an app on our phones now. If we had a phone, that you can do the app by itself. I'm going really quick today. I just talk a little bit about surface water because it's a lot of money. Everybody is going to go on to surface water because we're sinking. By the way, I went to a water conference in Dallas last weekend, and this was just a wow. One of the sessions I went to was on subsidence. During Hurricane Harvey, so much water fell that the weight from the water caused the greater Houston area to subside by a foot on average. That's huge. But because of subsidence is why we're going on surface water. So Lake Conroe, Lake Houston, Lake Livingston were all built for water supplies for Houston. And Conroe is going on surface water, Katie's going on surface water, Fort Bend's going on surface water. Our subsidence is somewhat stabilized, but we're building a water plant. There's a water plant on Lake Houston that they're doubling the size of it to pull more water out of the Trinity River. Well, all of this is costs money. Your RWA fee right now is currently about $4 per 1,000 gallons. They had projected that it was going to go up to $7, but they've done some refinancing of bonds over the years, which is a real cool thing, saving hundreds of millions of dollars. They're projecting the high end now is going to be about $5.25 per 1,000 gallons of water, and that will allow them to pay for the surface water. Anybody that wants to go to Regional Water Authority meetings, it's the first Monday of the month at 6 o'clock. The building is at Walters Road in 1960. It's extremely interesting, and it's open to the public. And it gives you, again, things to talk to your clients about. I've gone through just most everything. Questions?
What was the name of the organization you just mentioned?
The North Harris County Regional Water Authority. When is that?
Second.
So this is going to be fun. Y'all have read and heard about Ravenous. Brian's guest speaker next month at the Northwest Breakfast is going to be Jeff Linder with Harris County Flood Control. That's going to be interesting. He's always a good speaker. He's going to be talking more about meteorological stuff. And then in May, we've got the president of the Regional Water Authority that does a really cool presentation on surface water. But
tell us what you know about the Ravenel Country Club. I know that it's going to go away. It's going to be coming over.
I read a really lengthy, nice article from Jack Cagle that said, you people that just think we're going to dig a hole in the ground, you're wrong. He said, we're going to build fishing ponds. We're going to build walking paths. There's going to be playground areas. He said, we have not had one complaint about Michener Park at the Vintage. And he said, we're going to make it much nicer than that. Anybody heard, my understanding is the Champion Forest Water District owns all the golf courses. The clubhouse is only on like 27 acres. The clubhouse, parking lot, swimming pool, tennis courts. And I do know that they are shopping for somebody. The clubhouse is gone. It's got to go. It's flooded so many times. But the tennis courts and pool, they're looking for somebody to manage that and to maybe keep that as part of the deal. But that's still out there. But I haven't heard, is the county buying the two golf courses that were there from Champions Forest Water District or not? That I don't know. Probably that's what's going to happen. But I know they issued bonds to buy it, so I wonder if they'll just pay their bonds off. I know that they're working on several hundred flood projects in our watershed right now. They're working on Spring Gully. They're working on Dry Gully.
Faulky Gully.
Faulky Gully, big time. It is a mess. The gully down there going toward 45, they're working on. A lot of these projects are just repair projects. They're not increasing the watershed. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so whenever you have clients that call, because I'll have them call and ask me to obviously run comps or trying to protest your taxes. And I heard you say a comment where you say, okay, we'll either look for market value homes that we can say are lower, but what if you're really struggling finding market value homes that are lower? Then do you use HCAD appraisal?
It depends on how busy you are. And I know you're very busy. You don't have time to go street by street, house by house, looking at tax records, comparing unequal appraised value. The companies that protest the property taxes, they have computer algorithms that do it like that. And they pull the houses that best suit their case. When I have somebody call me and say, okay, Steve, I do want to protest. Great, I'll get back to you. Personal note goes out that day. All right. In a couple of days, I call them back and I go over the comps with them and say, you might want to spend a little bit of time. You might want, not me, spend a little bit of time going through HCAD, looking at values, see if your neighbor's houses look the same. I get to send them another personal note. If you have a client that touches you over tax protests, you get about 5 touches before you're done with it. And it just makes you look like you know what you're doing, and you're being very, very helpful. But I am not going to go house by house looking at appraised values.
So you would just more than, or what you normally do then is just get them in contact with a company that you.
I'll spend some time looking and see if I can help them if they want to go down there in person. I remember last time I was down there in person was when somebody told me about the I-file number on the green letter you get for your hearing. Okay, so when it comes time for a hearing, you get a green letter, and there's an I-file number at the top. And somebody told me, well, that's where you go to get the discovery for the houses they're using against you. And I'd never heard about that. So I ran on down to 290 and went to HCAD and stood in line and got it to the counter. And I had my letter and I said, this I-file number. And she said, yes. And I said, what is that? She said, that's where you go to get your houses they're using against you. So why doesn't it say that in the letter? She said, you're just supposed to know. Yeah. Now I think they're actually, from my understanding is, because of some state legislature changes, they're actually sending letters out telling people about homesteads exemptions and reminding, they're sending that out, and now their letter does say the I-file number is to look at the houses we're using against you. Years ago, they used to could go back 7 years on an exemption that wasn't filed, and now it's only 2 years. So if you owned the home January 1st of 2019, and it's a client of yours, let's just say you had a buyer in 2018 that you sold a house to, that everybody forgot to get their exemption. Well, you can file these, you can't do it with the app on the phone, you have to do it with the form. Fill it out for the exemption for 2019 and 2020, and you can actually get them a tax refund. That's actually part of my listing presentation. When I go on a listing presentation, I do a little bit of tax workup, and I've been on many listing presentations over the years where they did not have an exemption that they should, and I brought the exemption form with me completely filled out and said, put your birthday, put your driver's license. Let's take a picture of your driver's license, send this off, and you'll get a refund. And you'll be the only realtor doing that if you're against somebody else. Mark, you had a question?
Yes. Let's see. On Benton, one word on deadlines. Bettencourt side says that the notices of assessed value don't go out until the 1st through the 15th, and so the filing date is May 15th. May 15th. Yeah. And then I had a question on the 65 exemption. How does that work? Is it, does your property tax get fixed at a rate, or is it a percentage?
It's very, very complicated. Your school tax amount gets frozen and starts reducing. Okay. I don't know how fast it reduces. I just had a client a couple of years ago that her school tax had completely gone away. Now she was 90, and I just paid my parents' property taxes So they're in a house in Spring Shadows. The value of their house is, it's in the low threes. It had been over the 400. And my parents' total property tax bill last year was $480. And that's school and county. But dad turns 91 in a couple of months. But so your county is a fixed number. You get an amount of that. It's about 160,000. Your school tax gets frozen at wherever it was and gets reduced and starts going down from there. If you're in a water district, some water districts have it, and they're almost always just a fixed amount. Now, let's just say you're 70 and you're buying a new house with a 30-year loan, which would be the best way to do it. You can take your 65 exemption with you. The way you do that is you have to write a letter to the chief appraiser asking for the transfer from this property to this property. Can't do it online because I've tried. But that way you can take that frozen school number with you. You don't have to start over.
That's based on percentage, the percentage transfers.
No, if you're 65 and your school taxes are percentage of value, yes.
Yes.
Okay, yes, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So year over year, what should clients look for increase? What kind of percentage? You said 10% is the max that they.
Here in Harris County right now, for the average single family home for the last 5 years, we're well into the 40 percentile range. It's horrible.
But I thought the law was 10%. Now
Per
they
year.
get 10%.
Market and appraised. Market and appraised. They can go up as much as they want on market.
But not on the assessed.
So the appraised value, like on the sheet that I handed out, your mother, her appraised value is 238,064, and the market value is 342,838. I don't know how this new 3.5% is going to fix in, but prior to that legislation, she's going to have a 10% tax increase until her appraised value equals her market value. So she has 9 years of 10% tax increases. 9 years.
And there's nothing you can do about that.
Protest.
Well, I mean, you protest the
That's the only
market, you
thing.
protest
That's
the
the only
market.
thing you can do.
But once those two numbers come together, it goes up every year.
Yeah, the market's been always going.
It doesn't, in 2009, we all got a really nice
Yeah,
drop in value. Yeah. It can go down. Best example of stuff going down, y'all know the little neighborhood on Perry Road, Perry near Mills?
Yeah.
That they have the white fence that goes around the whole neighborhood and it's gated.
Right.
It's only gated, this just makes you angry. It's gated so they can keep the streets private, so they can build more houses per acre.
Right.
All right. If you've ever shown in there, you couldn't get a fire truck down those streets to save your life. If it catches fire, it's going to go to the ground. They did that so they could keep the streets private, so they could build more houses. That entire neighborhood was built on the Golden Sunshine Program, which was you walk into the door and you say, I have no money, I want to buy this house. And they said, well, you need a down payment, so you're going to make a little donation to this company out in California, and they're going to give you your down payment, and we're going to subsidize the whole thing, and it's all going to be hunky-dory. And by the way, you qualify for this house on the taxes for land value. They were qualifying people that couldn't afford them to begin with on taxes on $20,000. All right, well, if you buy a house in August, and you buy a house in August, the value's already set for that year. The tax bill comes out and goes to your mortgage company in November. Taxes get paid, everything's fine. You get new value the next year, the value doesn't get to your mortgage company until November, so you're a year behind. You find out when your escrow account is short in February. And now you're not only $200 a month behind for a whole year, they want $200 from here forward. So they want either $400 increase a month. Well, those of you that have been around for a long time, that almost that entire neighborhood went into foreclosure just about the same time. And HCAD values, it was the only time I've ever seen HCAD values go down by a third because the whole neighborhood just flushed down the toilet. Yes.
I ran into this yesterday and I didn't have like the best advice to give to my client because I was like, I wouldn't worry about the appraisal value, but he was worried. It's the Woodlands, Sterling Ridge area. And from 2017 to 2018, there was a significant drop in the tax rates, not just in this home that we were looking at, but all of the homes around it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I didn't have the knowledge to tell him why that would have happened.
So school districts dropped their tax rates this year because we're trying to do away with Robin Hood. We're gonna fund schools more through state dollars and sales tax than we were with taking it from Klein and giving it to Tomball. But I don't mean that. But that's the first thing that came to my mind. But the school taxes went down. The water district taxes are dropping a little bit because of if you have a water district board of directors that's being reasonable, that they don't want just the extra revenue, they're dropping the tax rate. County taxes did not go down at all.
It wasn't the rate, it was the appraised value of the home.
And that would be based on maybe the sales in the area have slowed down a little bit and maybe they're building some smaller homes. I know the house that I closed last week, my guys were in panic because the bank appraisal came in extremely good.
Mm-hmm.
And they were scared to death the county was going to see it. And I said, no, don't worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would it be because potentially new construction as well around the area?
Well, it could be that. I would have to look at it and look at the overall area. I know the area, my guys are in Creekside, the house, and those values are not going anywhere but skyrocketing.
Well, I just thought it was interesting because why would HCAD drop values, right? They're trying to make money. So so he was worried that it had a reflection.
What's Harvey?
Oh, Harvey was a double disaster. Harvey was a disaster, not just flooding the homes, but a disaster. So, okay, Harvey came and we had houses that were severely damaged that were being charged full taxes. Okay, our water board went to Harris County Appraisal District and said, we want these houses reappraised. And they wanted us to pay $1,000 a home to get reappraised. We said, we can't do that. We had 40 homes that flooded. The people that flooded, the people that flooded, they can pay the $1,000. No. And by the way, that's only gonna be for 1 year because they're gonna come back and check.
Right.
And if it's been fixed, then they're gonna rate, oh, it's new now, we need more money. We have one house in our neighborhood that flooded with Harvey that they mucked it out and the appraisal district has dropped value to $30,000. It's a one-story in the Oaks of Terra Nova West. Probably would sell for in the threes. It's a beautiful home. It's 2x4s on the inside. It's no homestead exemption, no 65 exemption. It's valued at $30,000 and it's just been sitting there since Harvey. Now we're going to have some automatic reappraisals for disasters that the county has to do it. We had several school districts that just went ahead and did it. I think Spring Branch did it, reappraised to drop people's taxes. Something else I just thought of, one of the questions. People, I hear realtors talk a lot about we bought in a new subdivision, the MUD tax rate was this, but it's going to go down as the subdivision ages. No, it doesn't. Take my district. I've been on the board for 15 years and we're in the low 60-cent range right now, but we've been in the 70s and our subdivision's 30 years old. It just depends on what's going on. We have issued all of the bonds that have been authorized, so we cannot borrow another penny in Terra Nova West. So we have to pay as we go. If we lose the water line that goes underneath Cypress Wood and we have to dig up Cypress Wood, that's $1 million. So we got to have the money in the bank because we can't borrow it. But these new subdivisions going in, the wild card on property taxes is the mud or the PUD. There is a limit on how much a mud can charge for taxes. It's approximately $2.25 per hundred. Okay.
The big limit.
Yeah. What's $2.25 on a $200,000 house? It's $5,000 in mud tax alone. But what I like to do when I'm talking to my buyers is I just an opinion. I like to see their total tax rate under 3. Just as a benchmark, not as a hard and fast rule. But if you have, I had clients, we were looking in Copperfield, which, by the way, Copperfield has several sections that has 2 water districts. So you have 2 mud forms, or 2 water district forms. But, and then we were looking at a subdivision across Barker Cypress in 290. The Barker Cypress in 290, their tax rate before exemption was $4.25 per hundred. Copperfield was 2.8, something like that. So that's $1.40 on a $200,000 house. That's $2,800 a year divided by 12. That's a significant difference in house payment. So when we're showing buyers, it's a big deal to be really aware of what the tax rates are. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
It's my understanding that anytime there's any taxing authority that has a value, like when the house was sold and you have a sales price, then any other taxing authority can use that as the value of the house.
Okay, in the old days, everybody had their own tax assessor, their tax appraiser. Spring Branch ISD, Klein ISD, they all had their own value set. The MUD set their own value. And so you'd have a Harris County bill that was at one value, Klein ISD another value, your MUD was a third value. And they thought that was the stupidest thing in the world. So they arrived at a central appraisal district. So the central appraisal district sets value for a property, and it sets the value for that property. Now there are several properties in this area that span the property line that actually more commercial than residential. But so you got half of your properties in Harris County, half of it's in Montgomery County, and the 2 appraisal districts have to get together. And my understanding is you can use either one, the lower of the 2 values. But once the county sets the value on your property, that's what's going to stay.
So I've always told my clients when they have their closing statement, not to provide the whole closing disclosure statement, to show the value.
Only if it's in their
top for ownership, because they take it to the water place, right? To get, they got another place to get a lot of them.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. The other taxing entities, it doesn't matter, because the MUD, you take your closing statement to get the water turned on. Like Tomball requires you to bring the closing statement. They don't tell HCAD what you paid for it. The only time I would take the closing statement to the county was if it was my benefit, that I bought the house for less than it's appraised for. Other than that, they're not going to see it. Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but what if you have a house in a neighborhood and that particular house won't sell for as much because there was a murder in the house? Can you fight that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It is something that affects the value of the property. And in this office in the last 20 years, we've unfortunately had several murders, and it runs about 25%, depending on what type of murder. Yes.
Along the same lines, you know, in houses, there's some older neighborhoods and some have a lot of improvements, maybe a pool, outdoor kitchen, you know, they've remodeled and repiped and everything. And then you've got some that don't. How does the county, do they, you know, sometimes they know of things and I'm like, how do they know of things?
So what the county does, great question. What the county does, and this just makes you furious. They take the sold values of the ones that benefit them, and that goes in the computer.
How do they know?
They've hired realtors to sit there in their office.
Okay, well, I guess that's okay.
Yeah. The tough, yeah.
They hire together with you. You say that you charge me $1,000 to reappraise the house.
That's what they told our water district. is if we wanted those 40 houses appraised, we have to spend $1,000 a house to do so.
How would they pay to appraise them to begin with or not?
No, the county doesn't charge to appraise the house. Just a quick thing on appraisal, because there's a whole lot of misnomers about appraisal. If you've taken an appraisal class, the one I took, the teacher, the first thing they said is, what is the purpose of the appraisal? And that determines what the value is going to be. If you're doing an appraisal for taxes, it's going to be a blanket appraisal. It's going to be comparing it to other properties in the area. It's going to be to the benefit of the appraisal district. If you're doing a refi, I did a refi 20 years ago on my house, and I told the appraiser, dude, if you don't make 20% equity, I'm not getting the loan. And I made 20% equity. If you're doing an appraisal to sell a house in 30 days because it has to be sold, that's going to be a different appraisal. If you're doing an appraisal for a 50% down loan, they may just drive by the house, make sure it's there. If you're doing a $1 down VA appraisal, it's a whole different look at value. So it just depends on what is the purpose of the appraisal to see how it's going to come out. And they're all going to be different numbers. Any other questions?
Do you have handouts you can send to me or letters, examples of letters or anything that they can?
Yeah, just come see me. I don't have a packet. I just play this on TV.
Tell Dan happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Well, thank y'all for coming. I hope it helped. And if you have questions, just come talk to me. DTAnow.com.
Say that again.
Or cutmytaxes.com is a partner. Yes, 100% online.
I want you to.
Thank you.
Oh, no, she doesn't ask that.
Did you accidentally take the trial?
No.
You need to call them, because so what happens is when you go to trial, I want to say you pay $500, and if you don't win, you lose $500. You need to call them and say, why am I going to liquidate? Why am I going to court? I don't remember authorizing you for that part.
I mean, we just turned it over a year ago. We get it